All right, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Happy Black History Month. Let's start there. So excited to be in you all's company. Welcome to tonight's hybrid episode of Green Table Talk. We shall overcome a history of the fight against legacy pollution in the Black community. My name is Kayla Shannon, and I am a junior at the illustrious Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, studying political science. And I'm also an advocate for the Flint community, so I am not new to the EJ space. I'm true to the EJ space. And tonight, our conversation will reflect our African ancestral practices. It's an intergenerational conversation that mirrors the foundation of the environmental justice movement. We are so honored to have some amazing EJ experts with us today, ranging from community organizing and political advocacy to research and science. So I'm not going to take up their time. I'm going to give them as much time as I can. And as we get started, I definitely just want to take some time for you all to do some short introductions. If you could give us, I forgot to mention my own. If you could give us your pronouns, mine or she, her, you could give us your pronouns and just a quick synopsis of what you'd like folks to know about you before we get started.
Okay, you're looking at me. So that means she's starting with me. My name is Robin Lewis. I am with Interfaith Power and Light, DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. My title is Director for Climate Equity. I've been working in the EJ space for over 10 years, a decade, with various nonprofits on trash incineration, water quality, affordable housing, gentrification, displacement, as well as other environmental issues, energy, and other things like that. I currently focus primarily with the Black church and focus on Black and brown communities and looking at various aspects of those communities and helping the church actually engage with the community so as to promote various types of justice and also push for policies that will make a difference in the community and access funds for them as well. So I don't want to talk too much about that, but I'll get into that later. So that's me. I'm from Jersey, so I throw that in. Hi.
Hello, my name is Rhonda Hamilton. I'm a native Washingtonian. I was raised in Southwest DC. I'm also an advisory neighborhood commissioner and president for Syphax Gardens Resident Council, which is a public housing property. And basically, I kind of stumbled into environmental justice out of wanting to help my community. Growing up with my community, we noticed a lot of times that people became ill very young, different types of asthma, heart disease, cancer. We've lost so many family members and friends, and we were very close in that community. And so I just learned through my work in health that there were connections between the pollutants that we were exposed to within the community and the fact that we were getting sick. And so out of that need to want to make better things better for our community, that's how I got into doing environmental work, just pushing and advocating for my community because we live right near a formerly huge industrial brownfield site, which is called Buzzards Point, which has a lot of historic pollutants from the industrial uses within that area.
Look, don't they sound good? I'm excited for this discussion already, but before we get into it, I would be remiss not to recognize our partners with the Black Millennials for Flint. We have the Environmental Defense Fund as well as the Climate Action Campaign. So thank you to our partners. Thank you for supporting the work that we do and making these conversations possible. So now as we get into these discussion, much progressive work has occurred under the leadership of Administrator Michael Reagan, including the establishment of the Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights, which debuted in one of the most historic places in the environmental justice movement, Warren County, North Carolina. For each of the panelists, how has the history of Black environmental justice leaders paved the way for the establishment of this office?
You want to go first? Okay. Well, you know, I'm happy to see that there's an establishment of an office. I will reserve how I feel about it until I see what they do. Okay, I work a lot with the EPA now and with the Department of Energy on the Inflation Reduction Act and how we can access those funds for communities that are overburdened and underserved. So I'm, cautiously optimistic, if you want to call it that. I think the history of the EPA and the government has not been very good with regard to communities that are suffering. That's why they're still suffering. And a lot of various complaints that went up through the EPA didn't get addressed. So I'm cautiously optimistic, that the brother will do something, and the office will step up and really hear the community and not just hear us, because I'm tired of people just hearing us. I want people to act and to push for policies or support policies and get the community at the table to not only just hear them but let them engage. So I want to see. Okay.
No, I appreciate that. And I think you bring up a really great point, because we live in a day where diversity is popular, right? It's cool, it's hip for companies and organizations to be diverse and to have these sort of performative acts of justice. But it's very important that they put their money where their mouth is in many different ways. So that makes sense.
And I agree totally with everything that you both have said, because when I first learned about all the pollutants within my community, the first thing someone said, well, go to the EPA. I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So I'm reaching out to the EPA. I'm like, they're going to help us. Our big brothers are coming. I don't think the door ever slammed so hard in my face in all my days, because it was like, and then they were to the point where, like, we'll offer help to the District of Columbia if they ask for help. And I'm like, what does that mean? We are a community full of people who are suffering. We need your help right now. But I felt like many more doors closed. I looked to them to be sort of like a big brother to come and to our rescue, but that didn't happen at all. And so I am also cautiously optimistic about this office. It sounds good on paper. I read about all the wonderful things that they're going to be doing, but when they actually help communities like mine that are fighting every day and breathing these pollutants every day and suffering, then that's when I would say, oh wow, that's a great thing. But right now, I don't know. I'm like, I don't trust it. We have to wait to see what they actually do to help those who are suffering.
Yeah.
And I just want to add a little bit. Rhonda she's an OG, okay? She's been out there, been fighting for years. So, and relating with, the government and trying to move things in her community. And I just want to honor that, sister, all the hard work that you put in all these years. I met her years ago, and she's still working.
I appreciate that. I love to see Black women celebrate each other. It just does something to my spirit, y'all. So one of the biggest gaps, and you all have sort of addressed this already in your response, that we see in big green organizations is that in real life, in real practical connections to how racist and classist environmental policies impact the daily lives of largely African American communities. It is easy to only see numbers, charts, and stats when analyzing the impacts of pollution on environmental health, but as I'm sure you all know, these figures represent real disparities in the lived experiences of minority communities. So for each of you, please share your experience with and strategies for successfully connecting directly with frontline communities. And as a second part to that, and I can repeat it if you need me to, what are both some victories and challenges associated with community organizing surrounding environmental justice? It's a big one.
I know. We probably have to break that one down, right?
Okay, you want me to break it in half?
Yeah,
Okay, I can do that.
yeah,
So first, share your experience with and strategies for successfully connecting directly with frontline communities.
So I work with faith communities right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I go right to the church, you know. And unfortunately, the traditional, a lot of traditional churches are hierarchical.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to access leadership. My last year, I spent the entire year talking to faith leaders around the DMV, you know, 75 plus, just connecting. Because, you know, in this work, you have to connect with people first because they got to trust you. There's so many people have come to the community and said, we're going to help or we're going to do this, and they don't listen. So I spend most of my time meeting with people and connecting with people and connecting with communities and going to community meetings and gathering data and connecting and making myself available. I give out my personal number. I have to. You know, people want to know you real. And guess what? You'll be on the phone for a long time. But I mean, that's the way I connect with frontline communities. I'm engaged personally.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And I think that's wonderful because it's very important to connect with the churches because they are so connected with the community. That's our basis. You know, they help and support and keep us together. For me, when we started this environmental fight, it's still in the fight. It's we didn't have resources. We didn't. A lot of people say, "Well, what's your website say?" I was like, "Website." It's like, okay, what's your Instagram say? Instagram. And so I was like, we don't have all of that tech savvy stuff. You know, we're just a community of people that are dealing with all of these problems with the environment. And so we began telling our story, one story shared among many. And we began telling our story to everyone who would listen, to everyone who cared, and to get them to understand because what they wanted us to do is they wanted to just redevelop this area and put us underneath like we weren't there. So everyone was like, "Oh, aren't you excited? The stadium is coming. Aren't you excited? We cleaning up these pollutants." I said, "But we're living through it. We don't live in high-rise buildings to filter dust. Our lungs have to filter it. You can sweep, mop, vacuum, do whatever you do, but once that dust comes from the cement plants, from construction, new bridge construction, it all enters your house and it accumulates. And then you wonder why every time I get in the house I have headaches and why my child doesn't feel well. You know, why do they have to have their inhaler all the time? It's because we're breathing in these pollutants. And the way that we were able to reach out, in the way that a lot of frontline communities are able to reach out, is through telling their story. It's passed on and handed down and it's shared and we talk about it. That's how we were able to let people know that, hey, we're here. They're throwing all this dust on us. We're coated with dust in our homes, on our bodies, on our cars, but we are here and this is what we're weren't able to get the recommendations implemented according to that, but it was, to me, still a small victory because at least it was done. And this is something that we can continue to push for in other major projects.
It's the small victories that get you to the big movements. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, just that I think when you're working with communities, you have to meet them where they are. And sometimes you go in and you have an idea of what the problem is, and it's really not what people are concerned about. So you have to start with what people are concerned about, and then, address that. Even if it takes a long time, or if you never circle back to your idea of what the problem was or what the solution was, it's okay. You have to let the community drive the process.
Yeah, that's great. So President Biden presented the State of the Union address earlier this month, during which he made a promise to prioritize replacing all lead service lines. In January, the Biden administration also announced the official Get the Lead Out partnership, where both Black Millennials for Flint and the Environmental Defense Fund are inaugural members. Dr. Phoenix, based on your rich experience in lead poisoning prevention, what have been the historical impacts of lead poisoning in the Black community? And what are your thoughts on this administration's approach to address the issue?
Well, I'm happy that there's a lot of federal money coming into communities to help, get rid of the lead pipes. But, there are a lot of other sources of lead in the community as well that are not being addressed. So, at least in DC, it's housing. Housing is a big problem, and we have very poor code enforcement. I mean, our code enforcement agency basically just had to be completely revamped recently. They built a brand new agency to do that, and it's not looking any better than the old one did. And so older housing with chipping and peeling paint is a problem. There have always been more Black and brown children affected by lead than white children. And it's driven kind of the national policy. The numbers used to be high for everybody, but then they got rid of lead in gasoline, and the numbers started to come down because, dirty air affects everybody. But poor housing really affects low-income people, particularly low-income people living in rental housing. And so, they declared victory about lead, but they didn't do anything really about the stock of housing that's deteriorating. Our lead pipe replacement plan in DC has very kind of spotty data that it's working on. So in Ward 7 and 8, they haven't tested a lot of the pipes, so they don't know whether they're leaded or not. They've done a lot of testing in Ward 3. So where do you think the activity is going to be centered? At least initially, it's going to be in the places where they've mapped thoroughly, and they haven't mapped thoroughly in Ward 7 and 8. So all of these issues tend to affect Black and brown people more, and the policies tend to benefit people, others.
Yes, and to your point, I think as an advocate for the Flint community, and at a time when a lot of money was going into the community, the question also became where does the money go? Right? Like we pump all of this. America loves to throw money at their problems, right? If we good for anything, I don't know if it's we. If they're good for anything, if they're good for anything, they're gonna throw money at a problem. But then the question is, what is the infrastructure in place to ensure that this money is actually addressing the issue that it was meant to? What is the infrastructure that you built? And oftentimes the answer is there is no infrastructure. We throw money and it goes where it lands. And so I think, to your point, there has to be more accountability behind these policies that throw money at the problem. So, do you have something to add?
No,
Okay.
I totally agree. I mean, we have, and it, unfortunately, the communities are going to have to engage and make them be accountable, and that requires educating everyone to understand what Dr. Janet is talking about, and understand that they're impacted, by this, and it impacts their health. And that's the hard part. That's the hard part. That's the part where we need everybody.
That's y'all. And you, social media. So, while national level advocacy is definitely a beneficial tactic to achieve environmental justice, the biggest and most lasting impacts of environmental justice come from organizing at the local grassroots level. Rhonda, or OG, you are known across the country for your community organizing efforts, particularly in Buzzard Point, a historical community in Southwest DC. Please share the importance of Black-led advocacy, resistance, and real-life experience from elevating people power.
So my whole thing is that it's important for the voices of the people within a community to be heard. A lot of times people from other groups, people come and go from outside the community. You have support sometimes and you don't have support other times. Sometimes you have people that stand by you through thick and thin, which we were very fortunate to have people like Dr. Phoenix, including some Dr. Shea. We have community supporters that have stood by us throughout the years. But I think the most important thing is for the community to push for itself and to be united and work together, because that's how we make change. Because oftentimes, by the time the project settles or people go home at the end of the day, you're still living there. You're facing those pollutants every single day. It doesn't have an on and off switch. So oftentimes it's up to the community members to do the things that they have to do to push for change within our communities. It's up to us. The fight is ours. We are fortunate to have people that will support, and we hope that policies will change on a national level. We hope that even local level there will be better things in place to protect vulnerable communities, but that's not the case right now. We're living every day with so many different challenges, and one of the things that happen is the environments in which we live on the outside. We're not only dealing with those pollutants, like Dr. Phoenix, you're dealing with lead pipes from our residents, that mold, asbestos, rodents. Those are all the things the challenges that you deal with in older housing that is not properly renovated and restored. And it's not enough money. Like you said, the money goes, but you don't know where it lands. And you wonder why the money is not put in place to protect and help the people. And that's the biggest challenges. But I think for our communities, we got to continue to be united together. This pandemic has made it very difficult. For a lot of families, we've lost a lot of lives. A lot of people are still suffering. Even those that were suffering, like these frontline communities, long before the pandemic, and they've been suffering for years and decades. And now attention is being highlighted on their communities, but we're still waiting to see what positive change is going to happen for the people that are most in need. And that's the difficult thing, is that we know what the struggles are and the problems are. We know that these communities have been fighting hard. They band together and they push and they advocate. But it's like, when is the real help going to come to change the outcomes for the people that are living every day, to honor the people who have died, paving the way for us to be at this table right now, for us to have the opportunities that we need, that we have now. It's come at a price, at a hefty price, at the price of lives, suffering, blood, sweat, and tears. And for me, my hope is to see our children live to be grandparents and great-grandparents. But I know in order for that to happen, it has to be us that fight at the community level, at the local level, us bind together to make that change, to create better outcomes and environments for these young people who will have to take the torch from us in the near future.
Yeah, so to your point, as a follow-up to that, there's a lot of disillusionment within underserved communities because of all of these years of fighting and working, or because there's just so much going on in their lives. They're on top of the jobs that they're working, on top of their families, on top of struggling with all of the other intersections of oppression that many of these communities experience. They're also expected to show up and be the voice for themselves. What are your tips and tricks for encouraging continued work and advocacy at the community level amongst communities that have so often showed up at the table and been ignored?
I feel like, for me, being a community leader, It's okay to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's okay. There have been times when I have advocated and I've just been on the ground, and I've had people to come and to pick me up and encourage me. And that's what we have to do for each other. It gets hard. These are difficult battles. You lose more than you win. And so I feel like when people are burning down or they tired and they have kids, they can't go to the meeting, there are other ways that they can help and support. And if they can't do it, someone else can step in and help. And that's why it's important for us to have these connections to other people who work with the churches, connections to people like Dr. Phoenix, who are her group advocates for better housing and living conditions for families. So I think for me, whatever you're able to do, I feel like a lot of times a huge burden falls on a community, but a lot of times it's up to us as individuals to figure out what part we can play, and for those who are not able to do it, who else can come in and pitch in to help and support.
That's great. No, I'm a big advocate for staying in your lane. Like, if you're not gonna do nothing else, learn your lane and stay there. All of us won't be at every march. All of us won't be at every council meeting. All of us won't. It's just impossible to stretch yourself thin. But when you find your lane, when you find the way that you can show up, can you send a letter once a week? Can you show up at least once? Can you show up late? And then once again, leaning on one another. So often people work in silos, and so I love that you touched on this idea that, like, community work is meant to be done in community. It isn't individuals working separately. It's us coming together as a collective and seeing in what ways we can support one another. All right, so now coming over to you, we hear the words climate change way more often than we hear climate justice. But we recognize that there will be no climate change without climate justice. And contrary to colonized beliefs, Black folks have historically been climate justice activists. So Robin, tell us about the history of Black leaders in the climate justice movement, and what can young climate justice leaders, like myself, learn from this Black history to best inform their work today?
Well, as I said earlier, climate is just a part of environmental justice. So I often put climate justice as a subset of environmental justice. And of course, the climate is changing. Look how beautiful it is. Everybody loves it. Well, this is not normal. Just so you know, the flowers blooming is early and they're going to die if it gets too cold. So the fact is, climate issues impact our communities more, such as heat, when it's hot in our communities, a lot of people who are Black, brown, poor don't have adequate air conditioning, adequate facilities in their homes. We have other issues with regard to flooding. I was doing a fracking campaign when we were banning fracking. I was calling people in Baltimore. This one lady said, look, I hear you, I support that, but I'm flooded. My basement's flooded. I don't have any money, and I have mold in my basement. Can you help me with that? And that was as a result of excess water and climate issues in our community. So we have various impacts of climate changes. And the justice aspect of that is not necessarily just helping those immediate issues, but mitigation strategies. And as Rhonda said, this is about coalition building. And that's one of the things that I do in my work, reaching out to various churches and reaching out to various faith communities to bring together a coalition of these communities so that we can do things together, because we can't do this by ourselves. And young people, I would say, the history of environmental justice started with young people, started in the communities, young people being dissatisfied. That's why we need that dissatisfaction, that rebel rousing. We need that. We need that, because guess what? It's your life and your children's life. I'm I need to pass the torch. I'm just going to say, all right? And I am trying to teach and give what I got so that you all can do what you need to do to help this planet and help us live healthy. And also bring awareness to what we eat, how we eat, the food that we eat that creates all kinds of methane, and you all know what I mean. I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that we all have to be cautious and conscious. And I find that people under 40 are more conscious and are more awoke about their health and wellness. The question is, will they do something about it? And that's where we need to collaborate. And that's where we need to come together. And I want to put in a plug for, organization that we're trying to start. There's this organization called Green the Church, and it's about getting Black churches together to fight for justice and do sustainable practices. Well, we've created one here, Green the Church DMV. So we have faith leaders coming together and helping the community to fight for sustainable practices, not just in their sanctuary or wherever they worship, but at home. We got to start with the basic stuff like recycling, composting, learning about those things. So I would encourage young folks, just get engaged. It's about your life, it's about your health, and it's about your future. It's no longer about somebody else. So get together. We need to be together. So.
Yes, I appreciate that. And to your point, it's the great thing about intergenerational work is that you have the wisdom of our elders in combination with that maybe sometimes naive confidence of the youth, right? That the idea that this can change and it's gonna be quick, and oftentimes it isn't, of course, but there's still that energy and the confidence that something can still happen, and maybe even sometimes new and innovative ways of looking at issues that, because sometimes when you're so close to an issue and you're so close to work, or you've been doing something in one way for so long, it's hard to even reimagine what it can look like. So I appreciate that. All right, y'all, it's hard to believe that we're almost done. I'm sad. I've been enjoying myself so deeply. Thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for all that you're doing in your communities to protect our environment. So now, here at the Green Table Talk, we always love to leave feeling empowered. So as we get ready to head out here, I want each of you all to answer, what is your final call to action to wrap up tonight's Green Table Talk? If they don't hear nothing else, which hopefully y'all heard all of it, I hope y'all paying attention. But if they don't hear anything else, what's your final call to action for our listeners?
You want to start?
Mine is, I'm a talker, y'all. I'm just from Jersey. What can I say? But mine is get connected. There are organizations out here that can connect you to all kinds of environmental, climate, food justice, if that's your thing, housing, if that healthy homes, housing, if that's your thing. I mean, whatever your thing is, there are groups that can connect you. So please just get connected. Get connected to each other. That'll get the work done. But we need to connect. That's my final call to action.
Well, I think my message would be, to seize power. I think really fundamentally EJ has always been about people making decisions about communities that are not their communities. And so, kind of getting embedded in that decision-making process is really an important thing to do. I'm just saying this in part because I spent all day testifying for oversight hearing. I mean, all day. Started at 9:30 in the morning, and I didn't, I got discouraged last year with that process and felt like, it felt like a waste of time. Sometimes you're talking, you're saying the same thing over and over again. You don't know if anyone is listening, but there are times when you have a breakthrough. I think Rhonda's words of wisdom, that you lose more than you win, are really words of wisdom. But when you win, it's really pretty sweet. And so you have to kind of stay aspirational and just keep chugging along, because there will be wins along the way. I was on a panel with Vernice Miller on Sunday, and she inspired me to think big, because I've been fighting about 295 for a long time. I work more on asthma now than I do on lead, and 295 is a problem. All my asthma kids live along 295. I mean, there's like a map, and there's red, like all along that 295 corridor. And she said, they're taking highways down in some communities. And I was floored by that. I had never thought to ask them to take the whole highway down. It didn't even occur to me that it might be possible. And someone sent me a report that had been done. There have been 15 or 16 communities in the country where they have said no more. You put this highway through a traditional African American community. You didn't care that there were health impacts. You didn't care that you divided people. You didn't care about any of that. You just wanted the cars to be able to go back and forth. So let's just blow it up. And they've been blowing things up. So now, I testify on Monday at the Department of Transportation, and I've changed my whole speech. So I'm going in there saying, let's take it down. And they probably won't take it down, but I've been saying, put up barriers. And so the fact that I'm going to go in and say take it down might mean I might get put up barriers. So you have to dream big and just kind of keep going and not get discouraged with the 7 losses, because there'll be 2 or 3 victories.
That's awesome.
All right, OG.
I would say, to me, it's the little things that matter most. Oftentimes people think, well, if I want to change something, you do gotta think big. But then sometimes it's like, you can start with helping your neighbor that live across the street. You need me to pick up some groceries while I'm at the store. I think it's when people know that you care and they feel that you care, it has a lasting impact on their lives. And I feel like a lot of times, especially with this pandemic, people have sometimes gotten away from getting to know each other and spending time with each other. But I encourage you to do that, because if there are things that you want to see to change in your community, it starts with small steps. Saying hi to your neighbor, going for coffee, sitting down in the park, taking a walk. And you may see some things that you want to change in your community, or some things that you want to be a part of, or some things you want to bring into that community. I feel like it's open. Whatever you see that you want to have an impact on, or whatever you see that could be different, whatever you see could be improved or made better, start with a small step. Make a phone call, write an email, or just knock on the door and say, hey, do you care about this issue? Maybe this is something that we can work on together. So that's how I would encourage you to spread your compassion to people, let your neighbors know you care, and whatever you feel motivated to do or to help, if something in this talk has motivated you to want to do or to change something, just go do it. And believe in yourself, because you can be the change, like I said, that you want to see.
I appreciate that. And look, I'm going to answer this one too. Wait, were you going to say something?
I was going to say amen.
Look, preach, let's pass the offering coffin. I will answer this one as well. As we're wrapping up, I would just say take care of yourselves. So often, those working at the grassroots level, those doing the real work, not the ones throwing the money, not the ones allocating the money, we take breaks last. We take care of everybody else, and then we get home dog tired, we're pouring from empty cups. I just want to say rest. Like if you don't do anything else today, take care of yourself, because at the end of the day, you can't do nothing from a coffin. You can't. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you everybody out there in social media land for joining us as well. Thank you again to our partners at the Environmental Defense Fund, as well as the Climate Action Campaign. And y'all join us again here next month, same place, same, I don't know if it'll be the same time, but I assume so. All right, have a good night.